attention to Hong Kong, a city that was once a proud international financial hub, but which now is increasingly a safe haven for illicit activity tied to the Chinese Communist Party. Hong Kong's opaque financial system, coupled with the sheer volume of cross-border financial flows from the mainland, has made it a magnet for criminal activity. Reports have shown the city's role in trade-based money laundering, shell companies, and fraudulent networks designed to move and obscure dirty money. Even more concerning, Hong Kong has become a staging ground for transactions that help sanctioned regimes, including North Korea, Russia, and Iran, gain access to the global financial system. This empowers those dangerous regimes and threatens the lives of the American people. These activities are not isolated crimes. When Hong Kong enables sanctions evasion, it weakens America's ability to hold our adversaries accountable, making it harder to stop nuclear proliferation, fund our national defense, or safeguard American businesses and workers from unfair competition. It means that regimes hostile to the United States can continue to finance weapons programs, fuel wars, and destabilize markets, all at the expense of American security and prosperity. Our roundtable today will shed light on these illicit networks and, then most importantly, discuss what policy solutions are needed to confront them. From stricter financial transparency to stronger enforcement and international coordination, the U.S. must ensure that Hong Kong cannot serve as a backdoor for Beijing's illicit financial operations. I want to thank
Hong Kong is backsliding. We know it, the world knows it, and now we have to do something about it. We all know about the repressive national security law. We know about the sham trial for Jimmy Lai. I'm actually going to ask that President Trump ask for his release as part of this summit. I think it's about time, and it would be appropriate, and it would be a sign of building confidence between our countries if he were to be released, among others. Secondly, we know that Hong Kong has become kind of a forward operating base for illicit transactions by the CCP. And there are two types of transactions in particular that at least I'm aware of. One is transshipment. We've heard of this. The chairman and I and others are co-sponsoring a bill to prosecute trade crimes, and one of those crimes is transshipment. That means where something is stamped as being made in one country that has not been sanctioned, but is actually made in China. And they use Hong Kong as a route to bring those illicit products into the United States. And so Hong Kong has unfortunately become a center for transshipment, and that has to be addressed. And through our trade crimes bill, I hope that we focus resources especially on Hong Kong. Another type of illicit financing is the listing of various sanctioned PRC companies on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, where foreign investors can invest in those through Hong Kong. That's something that, again, is of great concern because those particular companies could not receive investments were they to come to the United States and seek to obtain capital, but they can through Hong Kong. Not only Chinese companies, but also Iranian companies, as well as Russian companies are using Hong Kong as their kind of preferred place of illicit transactions. This is all because Hong Kong used to be a trusted center of global commerce. However, the people running Hong Kong cannot be trusted. That is the problem. They are using its old kind of good reputation in bad ways. And so now we have to call a spade a spade. The people running Hong Kong are not the same people who created Hong Kong's institutions that we used to rely on. So with new management in Hong Kong, we need new laws to deal with them. And so that's the purpose and part of today's discussion. I apologize in advance that I'm kind of shuttling to another room in this same complex and then to a hearing, so I have to leave pretty soon, but people will be coming in and out, and I thank you for coming in and testifying, and thank you to, I'm going to take point of personal privilege, John Stivers, our former staff director on the minority side, helped to put together today's event, so thank you for that as well.
Thank you, Ranking Member, and welcome back. Well, let me first turn to Mr. Pickett. Do you have any opening remarks to kick us off?
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm grateful to this committee's steadfast bipartisan commitment to Hong Kongers. It's very much appreciated by the community here and abroad. Hong Kong is a two-faced city. On one side, it stages a polished facade for global finance. This November, the Hong Kong government will host its Global Financial Leaders Investment Summit for the 4th year in a row. CEOs and senior executives from U.S. firms like Citibank, J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and BlackRock will sit politely as the city's chief executive, John Lee, himself under U.S. sanctions, welcomes them to invest. They'll dine with officials, strike deals, and hear about Hong Kong's openness. But just down the road, the reality is starkly different. Jimmy Lai, the media mogul and British citizen, sits in Stanley Prison. Joshua Wong, once a student activist who testified in this Congress next to Sunny Chung several years ago, has been in solitary confinement for years. Chow Hang-tung, one of Hong Kong's most prominent human rights lawyers, remains detained without trial and punished if she speaks out. These are only three among the more than 1,900 political prisoners since the 2019 protests, including me for several months in 2021 and 2022. As for those outside the prison walls who aspire for democracy, Hong Kong has become an open-air prison where dissent is impossible and every step is monitored. This dual reality defines Hong Kong today, a place where Western bankers shake hands with sanctioned officials, while the city courts dictators and rogue regimes. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, John Lee famously declared that Hong Kong would just, quote, laugh off the sanctions. And the city has made good on that promise. For the past 2 years, I've worked with the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation to document Hong Kong's role as the world's leading hub for sanctions evasion. Last year, I authored our report, Beneath the Harbor, which revealed U.S. and allied technology flowing through Hong Kong trading companies into Russia and Iran. This fall, CFHK will release a Canadian report tracing how Canadian technology has been diverted in the same way, with a European study to follow. Our findings are clear. Hong Kong has become the central artery for sanctions evasion, and the U.S. and its allies are falling behind. The numbers tell the story. After Russia's invasion, Hong Kong shipments dipped briefly, then surged. By the end of 2022, shipments to Russia had nearly doubled from pre-war levels. In just 5 months of 2023, Hong Kong exported $750 million worth of goods on the common high priority list, the very items most critical to Russia's war machine. Since then, Hong Kong has remained by far the most important node in the transfer of both Chinese and Western technology to Russia. One Hong Kong company, Puriclinos, pretended to sell fertilizer and charcoal. In reality, it shipped millions in U.S. semiconductors to Russian military suppliers, hidden behind a maze of front companies in Cyprus, a European Union member. Only after Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm grateful to this committee's steadfast bipartisan commitment to Hong Kongers. It's very much appreciated by the community here and abroad. Hong Kong is a two-faced city. On one side, it stages a polished facade for global finance. This November, the Hong Kong government will host its Global Financial Leaders Investment Summit for the 4th year in a row. CEOs and senior executives from U.S. firms like Citibank, J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and BlackRock will sit politely as the city's chief executive, John Lee, himself under U.S. sanctions, welcomes them to invest. They'll dine with officials, strike deals, and hear about Hong Kong's openness. But just down the road, the reality is starkly different. Jimmy Lai, the media mogul and British citizen, sits in Stanley Prison. Joshua Wong, once a student activist who testified in this Congress next to Sunny Chung several years ago, has been in solitary confinement for years. Chow Hang-tong, one of Hong Kong's most prominent human rights lawyers, remains detained without trial and punished if she speaks out. These are only three among the more than 1,900 political prisoners since the 2019 protests, including me for several months in 2021 and 2022. As for those outside the prison walls who aspire for democracy, Hong Kong has become an open-air prison where dissent is impossible and every step is monitored. This dual reality defines Hong Kong today, a place where Western bankers shake hands with sanctioned officials, while the city courts dictators and rogue regimes. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, John Lee famously declared that Hong Kong would just, quote, laugh off the sanctions. And the city has made good on that promise. For the past 2 years, I've worked with the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation to document Hong Kong's role as the world's leading hub for sanctions evasion. Last year, I authored our report, Beneath the Harbor, which revealed U.S. and allied technology flowing through Hong Kong trading companies into Russia and Iran. This fall, CFHK will release a Canadian report tracing how Canadian technology has been diverted in the same way, with a European study to follow. Our findings are clear. Hong Kong has become the central artery for sanctions evasion, and the U.S. and its allies are falling behind. The numbers tell the story. After Russia's invasion, Hong Kong shipments dipped briefly, then surged. By the end of 2022, shipments to Russia had nearly doubled from pre-war levels. In just 5 months of 2023, Hong Kong exported $750 million worth of goods on the common high priority list, the very items most critical to Russia's war machine. Since then, Hong Kong has remained by far the most important node in the transfer of both Chinese and Western technology to Russia. One Hong Kong company, Puriclinos, pretended to sell fertilizer and charcoal. In reality, it shipped millions in U.S. semiconductors to Russian military suppliers, hidden behind a maze of front companies in Cyprus, a European Union member. Only after my report with CFHK exposed it did the Treasury Department act to sanction this company. Another trader, Li Jianwang, supplied U.S.-made drone parts to Iran through his firm Arctronics. When the U.S. sanctioned this firm, he simply shut it down and reopened under a new name within days. And Retronic, a Hong Kong trader, has shipped over 1,400 consignments of restricted technology to Russia in the past year, openly shifting its website from English to Russian as it pivoted into sanctions-busting business. Retronic remains unsanctioned. These examples show the scale of the problem. Well-connected Hong Kong firms helping Russia, Iran, and others arm themselves against the West with little fear of consequences. So what can Congress do? First, strengthen enforcement. The Bureau of Industry and Security is tasked with stopping this global trade, but is starved of resources. A handful of investigators working with outdated tools are chasing sprawling networks across continents. The House Appropriations Committee has proposed $211 million for BIS this year, better than last year, but still over $100 million less than the Trump administration's request. Congress should bridge that gap and ensure that BIS has the staff and technology to compete. Second, Congress should move the bipartisan Stop CCP Money Laundering Act. This bill would require Treasury Secretary to determine whether Hong Kong should be designated as a primary money laundering concern, or PMLC. This designation would unlock powerful tools, such as requiring U.S. banks to gather detailed information on dollar transactions touching Hong Kong. Senators Curtis and Merkley and Representatives Wilson and Panetta have introduced it in both chambers. What it needs now is momentum, and your support as co-sponsors could provide that. Finally, we've been advocating for the administration to issue secondary sanctions against banks financing illicit trade through Hong Kong, but thus far, no Hong Kong bank has been sanctioned for this. We urge members of Congress to add their voice publicly to this call. Financing is absolutely essential for cross-border trading. Without credit, it is very difficult for these businesses to operate. Hong Kong has chosen its path. It's a city where bankers raise champagne glasses while political prisoners languish in solitary cells, and where the same government that jails lawyers and journalists facilitates the flow of Western technology to our adversaries. Congress has the power to act, to deny dictators this safe haven, and to show that the United States will not laugh off its own safety.
So Hong Kong holds a unique role in global finance. Even after the 1997 handover, it kept separate WTO membership along with China. The world saw Hong Kong as autonomous, but Beijing saw a way to tap global capital with Hong Kong without opening the mainland China to risk or scrutiny. And I will make 2 points today. Firstly, in peacetime, Hong Kong is Beijing's global engine for capital. And second, in wartime, Hong Kong can become a financial fortress for the CCP. Firstly, over the past 2 decades, Beijing has systematically transformed Hong Kong into its global engine for global capital and influence, ensuring that when international scrutiny closes in, China always has a way out. In 2025, 9 out of 10 IPO dollars raised in Hong Kong came from Chinese firms, and 62 out of 71 new listings in Hong Kong stock exchange market were mainland enterprises. When the US is trying to delist more Chinese companies in New York, Beijing simply reroutes them for Hong Kong. Every time we close a door here, Beijing opens a window there. For example, CATL, the world's largest EV battery and a US bank-listed Chinese company, raised $4.6 billion earlier this year for Hong Kong, directly supporting Beijing industrial and military civil fusion strategy. Apart from CATL, many Chinese biotech companies, semiconductor companies, AI companies, and even nuclear energy companies also close to Hong Kong to seek IPO to further amplify and electrify their ambitions and strategies. Also, Hong Kong is the largest offshore RMB Chinese currency center in the world. Hong Kong hosts more than 1 trillion RMB dollar in Hong Kong, and 80% of the global RMB placement processed for Hong Kong. After the Russian invasion of Ukraine, China and Russia settled oil purchases and other commodity truck purchases through Hong Kong using RMB placement. And also, when Russia tried to conduct businesses with Brazil, India, and other countries through RMB, this payment always went through Hong Kong. So the Beijing's goal is clear: try to build a parallel financial highway to bypass sanctions and try to de-dollarize the American dollar, and also try to promote the RMB trade. Secondly, Hong Kong as Beijing wartime financial fortress. In peacetime, Hong Kong attracts capital for Beijing, and in wartime, it becomes a fortress, weaponizing the capital against the US and its allies. By 2027, Hong Kong will overtake Switzerland to become the world's largest wealth management hub. In 2024, Hong Kong private wealth assets reached $1.5 trillion, up 50% year over year. And 23% of those wealth management are from North America, including the US and Canada. Those proportion includes US pension, endowment, and also private equity giants like Blackstone and MetLife. So when American capital is flowing through Hong Kong straight into Beijing strategic ambition, we should do something. US sanction and audit rules lose power when the firms can pivot to Hong Kong so easily. Nearly half of Taiwanese bank overseas profits also come from Hong Kong. Just this year, Taiwanese bank already earned over $700 million from Hong Kong, and Hong Kong far outpaces Singapore, London, and mainland China to become Taiwan's top offshore hub. In a Taiwan crisis, Beijing could actually reach outbound remittance, tracking foreign assets, including US pension, and redirect that capital to finance CCP military operation and stabilize Chinese domestic economic markets. It can also preserve American companies and also Taiwanese banks, since they have a lot of wealth in Hong Kong, into political compliance during contingency. Foreign investors could wake up to find their assets are hostages in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is now also launching a gold and commodity exchange, creating a non-dollar platform, model on lesson from Russian sanction experience. Hong Kong is Beijing financial contingency plan, a fortress built on to trap foreign capital, fund conflict, and destabilize US and ally system. Hong Kong is no longer just a market. This is Beijing financial aircraft carrier, projecting power far beyond the China borders. The U.S. now must work with allies to review Hong Kong economic status, re-examine Hong Kong's WTO membership, and set up outbound investment mechanism to track U.S. capital flows to prevent inadvertent financing of adversarial industry. Lastly, the U.S. government should also develop a strategy to counter RMB internationalization for Hong Kong before a Taiwan crisis happens to force reactive action. The next geopolitical financial crisis probably won't start on Wall Street, London, or Shanghai. It will start in Hong Kong.
My remarks today draw from the body of research my team and I have conducted at the Atlantic Council's Economic Safecraft Initiative to identify and assess the methods and techniques that China, Iran, Russia, and North Korea employ to circumvent and evade Western sanctions. We've coined this network the Axis Innovation. My insights also draw on my 15 years of experience as a career civil servant in the U.S. federal government, where I served in the intelligence community.
Maybe a little bit of both sides.
Okay. Sure. So my remarks also, is that better? Draw on my experience as a career civil servant in the intelligence community at the Treasury Department, the White House, and my last role was at FinCEN, where I was head of intelligence. So I have a significant background in money laundering and data secrecy acts. In the past 2.5 years at the Atlantic Council, I've led research on G7 coalition sanctions targeting Russia. And through this research, we identified similarities between the sanctions evasion technologies used by Russia and Iran to trade with China, such as the use of the shadow fleet, complex money laundering schemes, alternative payment systems, and cryptocurrencies. Hong Kong has increasingly come up in our research as a hub for sanctions evasion. This is further underscored by the frequent inclusion of Hong Kong-based individuals and entities in U.S. government actions targeting Russian, Iranian, and North Korean sanctions evasion networks. For example, this past June, the Treasury sanctioned more than 30 individuals and entities based in Hong Kong and the UAE tied to Iran's shadow banking network that uses a system of Iranian exchange houses and foreign front companies to launder billions of dollars through the international financial system. And as recently as this past Tuesday, Treasury sanctioned additional individuals and entities based in Hong Kong and the UAE that are part of this growing network and facilitating Iranian oil smuggling. So while Hong Kong continues to come up in sanctions evasion schemes, throughout this conversation, I do think it's important to keep in mind the role that Hong Kong continues to play in the global economy and the national financial system. Hong Kong ranks as the third largest financial center in the world and serves as a vital gateway between the East and the West. It's evolved into a major conduit for facilitating financial flows and activity between Western markets and mainland China. And in 2023, the Financial Action Task Force, which is the international standard-setting body for anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism, assessed in its follow-up report on Hong Kong's 2019 mutual evaluation that Hong Kong had made progress on its technical AML-CFT regime and maintains the technical competencies to manage money laundering risks. Hong Kong's technical AML competence was most recently demonstrated this past July when the Hong Kong Monetary Authority took disciplinary action against 3 banks due to deficiencies in their AML-CFT compliance regimes. Beyond finance, Hong Kong stands as a key global trade and shipping hub, with a significant portion of its exports consisting of re-exports destined for China. And the Hong Kong Stock Exchange is ranked among the top 5 largest stock exchanges in the world. As a major financial hub and bridge between China and the West, Hong Kong has emerged as a conduit of financial transactions between Chinese banks and sanctioned countries like Iran, Russia, and North Korea. Beijing has been cracking down on Hong Kong since the imposition of the National Security Law in 2020 and has significant influence over the so-called Special Administrative Region. Notably, and as my colleagues have also mentioned, in 2022, Hong Kong's chief executive John Lee said that the city would not implement U.S. sanctions on Russia, raising concerns that Hong Kong would become a formidable environment for sanctions evasion. It's important to note that Western financial institutions operating in Hong Kong are required to comply with Western sanctions. However, several Chinese banks have subsidiaries in Hong Kong, and Iranian, Russian, and North Korean actors use shell companies with complex ownership structures to get around these sanctions compliance measures. And ultimately gain access to the global financial system. Given Hong Kong's role as a global financial hub, as well as the role that China and Hong Kong-based individuals and entities play in illicit finance and sanctions evasion, we need to take concrete actions to counter this activity and safeguard the U.S. financial system and broader global financial system from abuse. So I would like to offer the following recommendations, and I am happy to go into more detail on these issues in our conversation. So first, we do need to increase our collective understanding of how the PRC is taking advantage of Hong Kong to launder money and evade sanctions through the financial intelligence collection and analysis, as well as information sharing with like-minded partners, including Australia, Japan, and those that we work with closely. And we need to get a better understanding of not only how China as a state is using Hong Kong, but also Chinese money laundering organizations, which I'm happy to get into in the conversation. Second, we should consider further engagement with Hong Kong authorities to communicate U.S. red lines as they relate to animosity and illicit finance. It's in Hong Kong's best interest to maintain its standing as a global financial hub, and Hong Kong has demonstrated its technical capacity and willingness to address certain money laundering within its jurisdiction, which may create an opportunity for further discussions. Third, we should continue engagement with the private sector and communicate expectations regarding outbound investment screening as it relates to China, Hong Kong, as well as Macau, and referring back to the final rule on outbound investment screening for U.S. investments in certain national security technologies and products in countries of concern that was issued this past January. Finally, we should consider taking additional restrictive economic measures, including targeted financial sanctions on individuals and entities operating in Hong Kong and that are involved in money laundering and sanctions evasion with a heavy focus on these Chinese money laundering networks, and enforce those actions. We should consider adding additional entities to the non-SDN Chinese military industrial companies list that prevents investment in these different companies that are listed on the stock exchange, and also add additional companies to DOD's 1260H list of Chinese military companies. And lastly, we should consider using FinCEN's 311 authority to identify Hong Kong-based financial institutions as primary money laundering concerns, but only after a comprehensive economic impact assessment to ensure that we are prepared to mitigate any unintended consequences of such an act.
Previously sanctioned Hong Kong companies for transshipping technology in the past, but the practice continues. Where is our policy failing when it comes to Hong Kong transshipment of U.S. technology to adversaries such as Russia and Iran, and what should change in our policy?
Thank you, Chairman. The single biggest thing is under-resourced investigators, and it's the hardest thing to come to Congress and ask for is more money for just about anything, but it is absolutely critical here that the Bureau of Industry and Security be able to significantly expand its investigations team, as well as update its technology. There was a Senate committee report late last year that extensively went into investigating BIS on this, and they found some deficiencies in BIS processes. But the biggest thing in talking to BIS was that they found that you've really got 4 or 5 people responsible for investigating the entire world on this, number one. And number 2, they're using incredibly outdated technology. The sanctions evaders are not using outdated technology. And they can hire whoever they want, as many people as they want, to take advantage of whatever systems they want to evade sanctions. There's a lot of money in this business, and it has to be countered with money as well. Number 2 is, there has been a reluctance, I think, among the last administration and so far in this administration as well, to sanction financial institutions, to designate financial institutions under 311, the primary money laundering concern designation. As Ken just noted, I think the reluctance there is that when you sanction a bank, it has ripple effects. And there are some worries about what that might be. Look, I used to be a corporate sanctions lawyer in Hong Kong. I advise Chinese banks, Hong Kong banks, American banks, European banks on U.S. sanctions. You don't need to sanction every bank doing this. They won't say this publicly, but they are very, very afraid of U.S. sanctions. These banks need access to U.S. dollars. They need access to the U.S. market. And you know, Kim recommended that more be done to ensure that we have a good understanding of what ripple effects would be. If you sanction one or two banks for trade finance on some of this, the other banks will fall in line. They will comply quietly with U.S. sanctions, and they will do more due diligence. So that's a key. Finally, outside of banks, there are other infrastructure issues. Now, if you sanction a trade company in Hong Kong, like in many other jurisdictions, especially corporate safe haven jurisdictions, they can dissolve their company and start a new company within days. So if you're just sanctioning the company, you're not really going to get very far. And that's mostly what the U.S. has done. It's mostly what the EU has done. We need to sanction more individuals, but just as importantly, we need to sanction these shipping companies that are shipping. These are actual goods, right? There are shipping companies that are shipping these goods to Russia. These are much more established companies with many more assets that are hard assets, and it's significantly harder to just switch from there. The corporate services companies in Hong Kong. Now, last year, BIS began sanctioning addresses in Hong Kong, where many of these companies have used corporate services companies to have fake addresses. Those can also change, but there does need to be more of an effort to go after these corporate services companies that are providing some of these corporate benefits. So banks, infrastructure, and more funding and more investigation resources for BIS would be the answer.
Why is Hong Kong the destination of choice?
Maybe I'll start, but I think there's several reasons why this is happening. Hong Kong's traditional role within the financial system, I mean, any major financial hub, there is sanctions evasion happening. Hong Kong is a critical hub for the Asia-Pacific region. A unique aspect of Hong Kong is that the Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the US dollar. So this creates opportunities to maneuver within the Hong Kong financial system. And then the way that offshore dollar clearing works in Hong Kong allows the activity that may be taking place in the Hong Kong as well as the Chinese financial sector to re-enter into our system through offshore dollar clearing. So there's a lot of different reasons why Hong Kong is a good place to also set up shop. They have pretty lax business operations and permissible business environments. And then you couple that with China's highly opaque financial system, it creates a space where it's pretty easy to eventually hide who owns a company and who you're moving money for.
The agreement when Great Britain handed over Hong Kong, I guess that Hong Kong was supposed to be semi-autonomous, right? The Chinese broke that. Would it be fair to say that every day the CCP is deeper and deeper embedded into Hong Kong, or are they already there and they're super embedded in, or is it still somewhat not completely assimilated, or it's really on its way to get assimilated completely?
Thank you for the question, Thompson. I would say, once as you may know, since a lot of political prisoners right now in Hong Kong, and then since we lost the political autonomy, and that's why the Beijing can actually peacefully control also the economic autonomy of Hong Kong. And then even though we witness perhaps American or even European capital going into Hong Kong, but that doesn't mean that actually Hong Kong is still remain economically autonomous. However, we see Xi Jinping has been trying very hard to integrate and absorb or assimilate Hong Kong into the so-called Greater Bay Area sub-state initiative. especially when the CCP right now is trying to build a more robust financial ecosystem. They use Hong Kong as the major weapon and then to do so. So Hong Kong right now is really, economically speaking, has been completely absorbed by China, and they are obligated to use their financial resources to serve the CCP interests in that sense.
Two questions, I think. The Western companies that are shipping to these other companies, say to Hong Kong, is there like a wink and a nod? Do they really know that they're shipping to? It's really they're shipping this stuff to evade sanctions and shipping it to Russia. We know it's going to go to Russia. We know it's going to go to China. But you know, you're telling us it's going to go to Tahiti, right? So, are our companies complicit in what's going on?
Yeah, so neither the U.S. nor Hong Kong make their customs records particularly open. Interestingly, and probably counterintuitively, Russia does. So a lot of what we have hard facts on is Hong Kong shipping U.S. goods to Russia. Now, with that said, we do have enough information to say that most likely most of these goods are not being shipped directly from the United States to Hong Kong. We're not seeing purchase orders for American-made ships shipped to Hong Kong. We think, by and large, they're going through third, or really, I guess you're talking about fourth countries now. The Eurasian countries, so the Kazakhstans of the world, have become a big part of this. The Emirates and places like that as well, where you're seeing a lot of transshipment through there. Now, with respect
so
to
a company here sends something to Emirates then we
or
back
Kazakhstan or to somewhere where they're permitted to do that. We don't have that much insight into confidential company information about exactly what sort of due diligence they're doing. Now, if they have knowledge under the law, they are breaking the law if this gets to Russia. Now, companies, there's some wiggle room there. And so, in their mind, the less diligence they do, the better. The question then is for enforcement. Is enforcement letting them get away with that? And we think they are in a lot of cases. And we have encouraged...
Remember the question was, did they know that eventually it was going to get there? It's just a wink and a nod. Yeah, I'm sending it over there.
It depends on the company,
over
but
there, and then eventually get to there, which we know is our final customer. And we're evading everything. That we're participating in this. Are American companies, Western companies, participating?
I think the answer would, by and large, be yes. They don't know exactly how it's going to get there. They don't know which particular shipments are going to get there, but they are not doing anywhere near enough to cut it down. We would like to see some of these companies, particularly some of the bigger tech companies, do more, such as sending over teams to audit and look at their distributors, to have things in their contracts with their distributors and with their buyers to ensure that they can do that. There's a lot more that these companies can and should be doing. We'd like to see enforcers put more pressure on these companies through investigations, through demanding and saying that even if you didn't have actual knowledge, you're burying your head in the sand to try to avoid having actual knowledge that some of this is happening.
My final question is about shipment itself. Do the shippers have a responsibility to know what it is that they're shipping to who?
Under the law, it is a knowledge standard, but typically what we're seeing is we're not seeing much in the way of enforcement around saying you need to do more.
I'm not talking
due
about
diligence.
I'm talking about law, period, okay? Do the shippers have a responsibility to know what they're shipping to who?
It's a little bit more complicated. They have a knowledge standard under the law.
Yeah.
Knowledge, in layman's terms, it's very clear, right? Under the law, though, it has some flexibility. It often means know or should have known. And that's the key. Right now, in most cases, we're treating it as did you actually know? There is a perfectly reasonable interpretation of the law that should have known justifies enforcement as well. And we'd like to see that.
Well, if they have a package supposed to be full of ping pong balls, and it weighs 40 pounds, well, it's not full of ping pong balls, right? So my kind of the final thing is, do you have, or are there certain shippers that are more likely to be engaged in this than others? I mean, you said there's a number of shipping lines, okay, well-known shipping lines, right?
Well-
Do you know who they are, and is it a certain number, or they're all involved in this, in this sector?
We have certain names of shipping lines in Hong Kong that we provide to BIS, that we have in our report here that we'd like to see sanctioned and have not yet been sanctioned. A lot of times what you see in customs records, these shipping lines know what they're shipping. That's the thing, because they put it into the Russian customs records. They say, name of the shipping line on behalf of so-and-so company. They fill out and they say it's Intel parts, it's NVIDIA parts. They know. They're not.
So the Russians actually put it in there, hey, we got some NVIDIA parts.
The shipping companies are putting it in there.
Okay.
So these are.
So they actually do know.
They do know. These are Hong Kong-based shipping companies that are taking care of it.
IPO that occurred in Hong Kong. What would you want to communicate to the CEOs of Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, their board of directors, their customers, the American people, about why that is a problem?
That's a great question, thank you, Chairman. I would say for two reasons, right? First of all, from a more human rights perspective, of course, since Hong Kong already lost its autonomy and many people, especially political prisoners right now, they suffer depressions. So for that reason, so for more reason, they shouldn't just go to Hong Kong and shake hands with the Chief Executive John Lee, who is sanctioned by the U.S. government right now, and then try to do business with them. So this is not business as usual, right? And secondly, from the business perspective, right? So since many people right now, even for the investment bank, they do recognize that geopolitics can be a game-changing factor, right? So during this high time, when the U.S.-China competition and rivalry really is increasing, Hong Kong is no longer a safe place for them to do businesses, and it's just very strategically a mistake that for them to still try to concentrate their assets back to Hong Kong. So we have statistics that actually just this year coming out, we see more and more U.S. capital actually goes back to Hong Kong. So we see this very concerning. We hope these business leaders try to opt for other international financial hub to do businesses, and they should definitely also embrace the human rights standard and records there.
RMB internationalization is helping to fuel many of the issues that we're talking about today. What steps can the U.S. take to address that?
That's a great question, thank you, Chairman. So we realize that, especially I think this administration and President Trump actually make it very publicly that if the Chinese government is trying to de-dollarize the US dollar, this is unacceptable. So I think, but also this is very crystal clear that the Chinese government has been trying really hard to push forward their own currency RMB, and the main hub is Hong Kong. As mentioned, 80% of the RMB transaction and the currency are deposited in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is a global financial center, and they use Hong Kong to try to do all this kind of like currency exchange and also try to do businesses. So since Hong Kong has more and more global businesses moving there, including American businesses, or some businesses from Latin America, Middle East are also coming to Hong Kong. So the Chinese government finds this a very optimal place to promote RMB internationalization. Secondly, I would also say after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, so the Russian can no longer use US dollar, but perhaps try to do businesses as usual. So they all come to Hong Kong and try to use RMB to do businesses with other countries, including India, Brazil. So I think President Trump has also made it very clear the current businesses made by India and Russia is actually intolerable. So I think, but one overlooked fact is that they are using Hong Kong to do all this kind of like RMB transaction. So it would be great for the U.S. government to communicate with airlines and other countries that should stop using RMB, and there will be punishment, and there will be diplomatic pressure or other means to hold them accountable. So I think this will be a very clear signal sent by the U.S. government not to use RMB for Hong Kong.
Sure, I can go next on that. My team actually just Tuesday released our latest edition of what we call the Dollar Dominance Monitor, where we actually measure the role of the dollar as a reserve currency and also a national security tool against other currencies, including renminbi. And right now, we continue to assess that the dollar for the near and immediate term is safe. So there is that. We are seeing where there is an increase in use of renminbi. And part of that is what we find is it's a sanctions mitigation tool to de-dollarize. And then it's also just where China is kind of including its influence, especially across the global south. And when it comes to Russia, so we're seeing on that, especially on export controls, evasion, because of the sanctions that have been put in place, we have seen where one typology for sanctions evasion is that China will continue buying, especially Russian oil, and they're paying for it in renminbi. And then Russia has excessive amounts of foreign reserves held in renminbi. Last July, it was 90% of their foreign reserve holdings. And so they're using that renminbi then to buy the technology from China. So invasion of export control, sanctions evasion, and everything else. So this is a huge problem. One of the challenges I think on the U.S. government side is that, especially on the financial intelligence side of the house, we can only see what's in our own jurisdiction. So we can't see the transactions that are taking place between China and Russia and Iran that are happening outside of the U.S. dollar with very limited insight into that. So I think that's where we do need, to Sam's points too, we need to make sure that we're resourcing our departments and agencies, including our intelligence community, to better understand how these networks are moving, what they're using for these transactions, and what it looks like. Another big piece on the renminbi side that we haven't really discussed yet is the role of digital assets. And specifically, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the actions the U.S. and G7 partners took against Russia, that's where we saw China's efforts to advance ECNY, which is their central bank digital currency. They really were very motivated to supercharge that. And so that, again, is just another way that it's kind of internationalizing their currency, even though it's in a digital form. But it's cheaper, it's faster. There's all of these great reasons behind it. I recognize there's different policy decisions in the U.S. that we're not going to pursue central bank digital currency ourselves, but we state the coins, and there's other ways we can do this. But in the digital asset space, I think it's increasingly important that the U.S. get out ahead of these issues, set international standards that everyone else complies with, so that we can circumvent where China is starting to take a lead on these different transactions and innovations. That I worry that eventually we're going to continue to lose insight into how they're working with different partners and doing